Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Jenny and I am that props girl. And today we are talking about one of my absolute favorite shows in the entire world. We are finally talking about Six the Musical. This is going to be a long video. It probably will actually be in 2 parts. So get comfy and get keen for that. Be sure to give this video a like because it lets me know you do enjoy this content, and consider hitting that subscribe button and bell so that you don't miss any of my future content. And with all that said and done, let's jump straight into this video. I have been wanting to film this video for the longest time. As I said, Six is one of my absolute favorite musicals. I discovered it in, I think, the start of 2020 because it was playing at the Sydney Opera House and I didn't get to see it in 2020. But one of my friends who did go and see it said, oh my gosh, you need to go and see this musical. You will absolutely love it. I instantly started listening to the soundtrack and fell in love. And I want to preface this by saying I already knew the story of Henry VIII and all of his wives prior to discovering Six. So if you don't know, Six is about the wives side of the story. So basically, like, Henry VIII had 6 wives. There's a lot of rhymes about, like, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. So I'm just going to do a little couple minute history lesson for any of you who might not be familiar. Henry VIII was a king in England. He is the father of Queen Elizabeth I, King Edward, don't know quite what the number is, and Queen Mary. So basically he married his first wife, Catherine. So she was originally his brother's wife, and his brother died, and so he married Catherine. Now, there's some biblical stuff about not marrying your brother's wife, and he had Mary with her, and they wanted to have a male heir because that's the way that lineage works in Britain. So they were trying to secure a male heir, and unfortunately Catherine kept miscarrying and miscarrying and miscarrying. She was in love with Henry. He was originally very much in love with her, but unfortunately he needed an heir and he needed a way to get out of the marriage because they were both Roman Catholics. So he went as far to go to the Pope and appeal the fact that he should be allowed to divorce Catherine because of the fact that he married his brother's wife, and that God was punishing him for said deed and not providing him with a son. The Catholic Church did not allow the divorce to take place, so Henry basically changed religions. Now, there was a lot of stuff going on in Europe, I think, at the time when Lutheranism was starting to come out, which is kind of how the Church of England came about, which was sort of like a hybrid. So Henry essentially created his own sort of religion where the monarch became the head of the church, and that's how the Church of England worked, and he basically is the appointed person by God. So he chose to divorce Catherine and he decided to marry his mistress. Now, it is also known that he did have a son, which was an illegitimate son whilst he was married to Catherine as well, but we are not talking about that now. So he dated, first of all, Anne Boleyn's sister, and then, I say dated, you know, he had an affair with Anne Boleyn's sister, and then he ended up with Anne. Anne was his mistress for a long time, and then he ended up marrying her. They had the daughter Elizabeth, and then she miscarried again, and once again, he was like, God is punishing me. He beheaded her and then married Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour, beautiful, known as the one he truly loved, which is referenced in the musical. And unfortunately, she did give him a son, but she died. So he was devastated after that. And unfortunately, Edward was always a sickly child, and he died at a young age. So he became monarch, but he died, I think, maybe in his 20s, not quite sure, but he definitely died young. So after that, he was very much, I think, of the opinion by his counselors were saying you need to be married and that sort of thing. So it's kind of like a blind date situation. He agreed to marry someone he had never met from Germany, and her name was Anne of Cleves. So basically he saw a painting of her and said, yep, she's the one I'm going to marry. She was shipped over to the UK. They ended up getting married, and he decided he didn't like her very much, so they got divorced. But kindly, the church annulled that marriage, and so he treated her like a sister and ended up giving her a lot of money, and she lived a very comfortable life. So out of all the wives, she was pretty well off, apart from the fact of the stigmatism of the king didn't like you because you're not pretty enough. After that, And he's like, Henry's getting pretty old at this point. Like, he is not a young stallion anymore. After that, he took an extremely young bride. I think she was maybe like 16 or 17 in Catherine Howard, and married her. And she was a little bit of a flirt too. And so she had a history of being a bit of a flirt, and then married the king. And I feel like she maybe didn't like being, you know, cooped up in the palace and forgotten about. She was found to be having a fling, and so he beheaded her too. And then he married Catherine Parr. Catherine Parr is the one who survived, and she was actually the one I didn't know as much about, and Six really educated me in that. So there is my far too long history lesson on that. Now, I know that it may not be 100% accurate, that sort of thing. I'm not a historian, but that is my knowledge on what actually happened. So I have always really loved Queen Elizabeth I, so I knew a lot about King Henry VIII and all that sort of side of history before Six came into existence. And I'm not gonna lie, I also watched the Tudors, so I had a little bit of knowledge. I'm not saying that the Tudors is historically accurate, I'm just saying it depicts essentially what happened. So Six came along, I fell in love with the songs, and I finally got to see it in 2021. Now, I was a big member of the Queendom, that is called basically the community of fans. And that's one of the first things I want to talk to you about. Six is a very unique musical for the fact that it has a massive global following. Like, you look at shows like Hamilton and like people like that show and that sort of thing. This is like on a different level. The fandom, well, actually it's called the Queendom, of Six is huge. Like, I myself am in a Facebook group, which is just the Australian, I think maybe Australian, New Zealand Six fans. But it is just it's huge. And like, I saw the show 6 times, and my friend Cass, she saw it more than that. And like, Cass traveled to different states to go and see this show. It's like a pop star sort of thing. And Six is such a different musical, and that's why it's got such an incredible fan base. One of the things that's amazing about Six is the fact that, one, the cast is all women. It is, and like, it's cool because it is kind of satirizing, but also it's like a retelling of history through the eyes of the women who, for so long, it was like Henry VIII and his wives. But as they say in the musical, it's like, but would Henry actually be so significant if it wasn't for all of these wives? Like, is the fact that he had 6 wives, and maybe they were 6 scandalous wives, but is that what actually made him famous? And I really like the fact that they talk about the stories of these wives, and they actually shed light on that. And of course, like, you know, the UK and like just in general, like the patriarchy and all that sort of stuff, they're not like crapping on it, but they're commenting on it. And I think that this musical came at the right time, because this musical would not have potentially done so well in previous decades where, you know, like women's rights and just rights for people in general are so prominent. I love the fact that this musical is very much like women empowerment is such a key theme in the musical. It's also really different for the fact that it is like a 75-minute show. It's straight through. It's kind of like pop songs. Like, it's not like your classic sort of musical sound, but it's just phenomenal. And it literally feels like you're going to a concert. And I think it's all of these different vibes is what makes it so different, but also so cool and so unique. I think it's kind of a bit like Hamilton, that the fact that Hamilton is wrapped and it's like telling history in a different way through a different medium, and it's relating to a different demographic. And that's kind of like sort of how Six operates as well. Of course, it's not entirely historically accurate, and that's okay. It's the same with Hamilton. There are gaps. There are things that, you know, didn't get covered, but, you know, we let that slide. So with all of that said, let's talk a little bit about the creative side of Six. I am a massive Six fan, as I've said a couple of times. I have my Jane Seymour inspired my Jane Seymour inspired little headband here today. But like the thing is that the fans of Six, they dress up, and it's just got such a cult following. And like I have got, my friend Cassie made them for me, I have got, you know, Anne Boleyn inspired shoes that are completely rhinestone to make them look like them. Like people dress up to look like them. It's just amazing. And I remember like going to this show and going, what am I going to wear? Because I want to dress like one of the queens. It's just so phenomenal. And I was so privileged to be able to see it so many times. I want to talk about briefly, before I jump into talking about the queens, because I know I'm going to forget to talk about this, the set. So this show is kind of minimal for the fact that the costuming and the girls actually kind of do most of the work. So, but the set in general, it's normally like kind of, it feels like you're kind of in a corner, like it's like a trapezium shape. And so it worked really well in the studio theatre at the Opera House because it was kind of backed into a corner. So it's basically, you have these like LED sort of panels, which are kind of like church windows, which is like giving it that Tudor vibe. But basically you have all these LED little strips that sort of make up the shapes that go into that. And they change shape throughout the show. And I remember watching, I think it was Aragon's song, and it starts with like, they've got like this beat that's underlying the intro to her song that's like dun dun, and then she'll speak dun dun. And that, as that pattern, like the little LED strips, like another one would light up and another one would light up and another one would light up until like the song would start, and then you'd see this full picture of like the outline of the window. And it was used really cleverly. So it's simple, but very effective. It's a simple way how the lighting is actually working as sort of the set piece as well. So it's a really clever combination there. And the lighting was also very clever for the fact that, for example, when we're coming out of like Anne Boleyn's upbeat song and we're going into Heart of Stone, the lighting gets cold. Stone is like cold. That's the vibe that we're going for. And it's really brought down into this like single focus on Jane at the front of the stage. But that contrast to having like party number of like the Spanish inspired Aragon, and then we've got like Boleyn's fun number into darkness. Like it's just such a like juxtaposition, because the LEDs are not used at all. Like the back wall is not utilized in that song. And then you've got beautiful Jane having her solo. And then you go into House of Holbein, and House of Holbein is totally different because they use neon for that number, which is really clever again. So they're kind of like going from exciting, like, you know, party warm colors to cold to like neon. So using like blue lighting and like to emphasize like the white and the green and all that sort of stuff. And it's like crazy, like all the colors come out for that one into the final songs of the show. And it's just one of those things that's like, it's really cool how writers, you know, they have to put light and shade into shows. And yes, like Jane Seymour is an obvious choice. Her story is quite tragic, but to be honest, they're all very tragic stories. But the plotline of Jane Seymour works very well as a nice juncture there. And House of Holbein fits in the middle as sort of like that, here's a little interlude. We're going to wake you guys up again with a party number. Then we're going to go into the cool song of Get Down. Now, look, when it comes to favorite queens, I must say, like, in terms of aesthetic and dress, like, I must say I'm a huge Boleyn fan. Like, my shoes are Boleyn. I absolutely adore her. But I also love Cleves as well. So I'm very impartial to Get Down. Especially our Australian cast was absolutely phenomenal. And, like, all of the swings, all of the cast, I saw every single one of them on stage. They were all phenomenal, and I just adore all of them. And I'm so sad that Six is now closed in Australia, but it had an extremely long run and a very, very, very loyal fan base. I love the fact as well is that Six is very much like the telling of these wives' stories, and we get to see like how far society's changed, but also how far it hasn't. And I love that, you know, when Catherine Howard is having her little moment, and she was saying like, you know, sometimes men just hire women to get them into their private chambers. It was a different world back then. It's a dig to say like that thing still happens. Like nothing has actually changed. And there's so many themes in this show that yes, we see them through like the Tudor era, but how much of society has not changed in several centuries. Like, the patriarchy is just, I don't want to say it's plagued, because that's not the right word, but like, it's just been so present in society, and women in particular have been pushed to the side and been made to suffer. And I love the fact that Six gets to like stand up for these ladies and actually gets to say, hey, this isn't okay. Like, I didn't know that Catherine Parr was a writer. I didn't know that like she was fighting for women. Like, that's incredible. And I love the fact that her story is known now, because she does come at the end and everyone's just like, oh, great, you survived. But it's so true. She did so much more than just survive. She thrived, and all of them were robbed of that opportunity. And I'm not saying, oh, it's because of Henry VIII, but it kind of is. But, you know, I love the fact that these women can be celebrated. And I think it's sad, you know, that so much time has passed for them to be able to be celebrated. But I think that Six is a really healthy way. And it's similar, and it gets to Hamilton, of saying like, he was a founding father, you know, who maybe isn't as well known as George Washington and all those sorts of things, but he played a key part in how America was formed. And I think that it's really cool that these sorts of stories are being told through musicals and all sorts of stuff. Another great thing about Six and Hamilton is the fact that it's brought people into the theatre who maybe weren't interested in theatre before. Because I'm not going to lie, theatre is not for everybody, and musicals are not for everybody. But a rapt musical and a pop musical, they are going to get more attention, and they did. So classic musical theatre fans can complain all they like. I'm a classical musical theatre fan. I love all musicals. But I'm sorry, like, you cannot complain for the fact that people are coming back to the theatre. That's just my little gripe there. It's amazing to see people in theatre. It's amazing to see more people experiencing theatre than ever before through shows of different mediums. And I think that then they have a place, and there need to be more of them. Okay, and I've mentioned it before, the fans. So the Six fans were just something else. Okay, so this is a little shout out to my friend Cass. She is definitely a Mega Six fan. And she went around to see it in a multiple different venues. We live in New South Wales, and she went to Sydney to see it multiple times. She went to Melbourne, she went to Queensland, she went to Canberra. Like, she did the East Coast. And I'm pretty sure she would have gone to Adelaide too, Adelaide as well if she could. And she's also a graphic artist, and she did graphic artworks. She actually gave them to the performers themselves, and all of the swings got them. And she like so many, like, took it so personally, because Six is one of those stories that there is an element that you can connect with, and that's great. And I love the fact that, you know, out of this, she sort of sparked a business, and she got interest, and all of the performers were really excited because they were like, oh my gosh, someone actually, you know, took the time to create an artwork about a show that really connected with them. And I think that that's really, really cool. And Cass is not the only person. I'm going to link her down below if you wanted to check out her Instagram page or anything like that. But, you know, there are other artists too. And like my best friend, her sister is also a photographer, and at the end of Six, you're allowed to take photos, you're allowed to film, and it's a unique show for that fact that they do tell you, like, you know, don't film at any other point in the show, but you're allowed to film at the end, which is really super fun. And I think that's another reason that Six grew, was because you were allowed to take videos and photos. Then, you know, people can see what this show is all about. People will see a video and go, I want to go and see that show. But I've digressed a little bit. But my best friend, you know, she's a photographer. And so she was able to, you know, take photos and use them. And then, like, you know, Six Australia would share them and that sort of thing. And like, it's really, really cool to see how the fans really connected with this show. It was just such a beautiful thing. And like, I cried the first time I saw the show because I was so excited. I also want to shout out to the incredible Ladies in Waiting. So the Ladies in Waiting are the band. So there is a drummer, there's keys, there's bass, and a regular guitarist. And they are just phenomenal. They have costumes too, and I love watching them because they get so into it, and it's just really cool to see like the female representation on this show. And women in the arts, you know, I think we have struggled and strived to like pave our way, and this was just such an incredible testament to how far we have come, and be like, yes, this is a story told by women, and it's amazing. I also love the fact that Six is extremely inclusive when it comes to gender as well, and like there were so many people within the LGBTQI plus community who were either involved in the cast or who, you know, are part of the Loyal Queendom, and I love the fact that it's been so inclusive and it's been beautiful to watch as well, and to allow performers to be themselves and to not say, women, you must always shave your underarms. No, like I remember with the Australian cast, like our amazing Bolin, and they didn't want to shave under their arms, and that was okay. Like I love the fact that it was not saying like, you're playing a woman, but you have to be this picture perfect, peaceful woman. It was like, no, you can be who you want to be, and we're going to love you for that. And I love the fact that it just changed societal norms like that. Honestly, like hats off to all of the swings, because this show was on like straight after COVID. Like this show, like we wore masks when we went to see it. This was the first show I saw coming out of COVID, and oh my gosh, like it's just amazing, and the swings kept that show going. It's actually normalized the fact that it's okay for people to have time off. It's okay for people to take vocal rest. Like the swings are there for that reason, and I think that that's a great thing. And I think there's been this stigmatism because of the whole Sutton Foster, like Thoroughly Modern Millie incident. And if you're not familiar with that, Sutton Foster was the understudy for Millie in Thoroughly Modern Millie on Broadway, and she went on for the lead once and she never left, and basically I think they recast and said, no, you're the lead now. And everyone's like, oh, you don't want what happened to Sutton Foster? And that's like talked about in the show Smash. And if you haven't watched Smash, please watch it. It's amazing. But I think it's normalized the fact that like everybody deserves to have a day off, and like actors are working as well, and like this is their job, and what they're doing is physically draining and physically exhausting, and we can't keep expecting them to run themselves ragged for entertainment. Like that's sick and stupid. So yeah, I really love that. I am going to put part 1 to rest here because I really want to like go in depth about the costumes in Six. So I'm going to put that into part 2. So please stay tuned for that. Give this video a like if you did enjoy it, and leave me comments down below about if you're a mega Six fan and all sorts of stuff, how many times you've seen Six. I want to hear all about it. And consider hitting that subscribe button and bell so that you don't miss my next video or any of the other ones that come afterwards. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.